Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Welcome to the 7th episode of Secrets of Harry Potter. For those who've stumbled upon it for the first time, or who may have forgotten what it's about, here's a quick reminder. Here we dive into curious details from the books that never made it into the films, yet do not contradict them. In past episodes, we've already uncovered how Dudley got rid of his pig's tail, where Aragog's brood that terrorized the Forbidden Forest came from, why Kreacher obeyed Harry, and much more. Today, you'll discover new revelations, the hidden truth of the Secret Keeper, the fate of Buckbeak, the grim story of the night bus conductor, the limits of wizarding power, and Hermione's difficult choice without the time turner. Get comfortable, it's going to be fascinating. Number 1, the fugitive's fate. Buckbeak is one of the characters unjustly forgotten after Prisoner of Azkaban. In the movie, we only see him escape with Sirius, but what happened after that? Book readers know that Buckbeak settled with Sirius at Grimmauld Place, living in his mother's bedroom. There he remained quietly, while his master fought alongside the Order of the Phoenix. In the 5th film, they could at least have hinted at his presence, but they didn't. "I've been feeding Buckbeak," said Sirius, answering Harry's questioning look. "I keep him upstairs in my mother's room." Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. After Sirius's death, all his property passed to Harry, including Buckbeak. But Harry, knowing where the hippogriff truly belonged, returned him to Hagrid. With the half-giant, he lived under the name Witherwings, since the formal death sentence for attacking Malfoy was still in effect. Buckbeak even fought in the final battle of Hogwarts. Together with the Thestrals, he attacked the giants, aiding the castle's defenders. Number 2, the conductor's secret. In Prisoner of Azkaban, we meet Stan Shunpike, the cheerful conductor of the night bus. On screen, he appears only once, but in the books, his story takes a much darker turn. In Half-Blood Prince, the Daily Prophet reports that Stan was arrested on suspicion of aiding Death Eaters. Stanley Shunpike, conductor of the night bus, has been arrested on suspicion of Death Eater activity. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. The reason is absurd. Witnesses claimed they had overheard him boasting in a pub about the Dark Lord's plans. Nobody truly believed he was guilty, not even Dumbledore. But the Ministry needed headline cases to show they were fighting the enemy, so Stan was sent to Azkaban. Later, in Deathly Hallows, he appeared among the escaped prisoners and even attacked Harry during the Seven Potters operation. In the red light of another curse, Harry saw Stan Shunpike's strangely blank face. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. He was almost certainly under the Imperious curse. After Voldemort's fall, Stan's fate remains unknown, though many fans assume he returned to a normal life. Number 3, the limitations of wizards. Though wizards may seem nearly omnipotent, their powers are far from absolute. Many spell effects are irreversible. George's missing ear, Lockhart's shattered memory, none of these could be restored. Another striking example is the 5 fundamental exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. Hermione mentions them in Deathly Hallows. Only one is revealed. Food cannot be created out of nothing. You can't conjure food from nothing. You can summon it if you know where it is. You can transform it. You can increase the quantity, but you can't make it out of thin air. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Rowling never disclosed the others, leaving plenty of room for fan theories. Number 4, without the time turner. In her 3rd year, Hermione decided to take every possible subject, including Muggle studies. To make this feasible, McGonagall secured for her a rare Ministry artifact, the Time Turner. For months, Hermione used it to rush from one class to another, but even then, keeping up the pace was nearly unbearable. So what happened when the time turner was taken away? Simple. She dropped divination and Muggle studies. I've been nearly out of my mind with this time turner. Without divination and Muggle studies, I'll have a normal schedule again. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. That way, Hermione returned to a normal life, still a top student, even without magical shortcuts. Number 5. The Rat's Betrayal. Throughout Prisoner of Azkaban, the audience is led to believe Sirius Black betrayed the Potters. But the truth is far darker. The real traitor was Peter Pettigrew, Ron's pet rat. The books reveal the mechanism of the Fidelius charm. Only one person, the secret keeper, can know the location of the hiding place and disclose it willingly. Originally, Sirius was to be the keeper, but at the last moment he insisted the Potters trust Peter instead. I thought the bluff would work, but you betrayed the Potters, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Pettigrew immediately told Voldemort where they were, and when James and Lily were murdered, everyone assumed Sirius was guilty. His laughter at the crime scene sealed their suspicions. One disastrous decision cost the Potters their lives and Sirius his freedom. Why James didn't become the secret keeper himself remains only a matter of fan theory. Number 6. The secret of Dumbledore's wand. The Elder Wand was never Voldemort's to command. In the Deathly Hallows, the turning point comes when Draco Malfoy disarms Albus Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower. At that moment, without realizing it, Draco became the wand's true master. Later, when Harry wrested Draco's wand from him in Malfoy Manor, the allegiance shifted again. It did not matter that Voldemort stole the wand from Dumbledore's tomb. The wand's loyalty followed the chain of conquest, not the thief who pried it from a grave. That is why, in the final duel, Voldemort's curse rebounded. The wand refused to kill its rightful master. Harry explains it himself. Doesn't matter that you've killed the Snape, it's me you can't kill, because I was the true master of the Elder Wand. The films simplify this into luck, but the books show it was not chance at all. It was the wand's choice, and it chose Harry. Number 7. The Dursleys after Harry Potter. When Harry turned 17, the protection of Privet Drive ended. The Dursleys had no choice but to leave their home. In the Deathly Hallows, members of the Order of the Phoenix escorted them into hiding. Vernon blustered, Petunia looked pale, and Dudley surprised everyone. As he shook Harry's hand, he said quietly, "I don't think you're a waste of space." It was a moment no one expected. The films skipped it, but in the books it marked the first crack in years of coldness. Rowling later revealed in drafts and interviews that this moment was not forgotten. Dudley and Harry never became close, but they managed a fragile truce. Dudley even invited Harry to visit from time to time. It was not friendship, but it was something more than silence. For two boys who grew up under the same roof in such bitterness, it was a small but powerful sign of change. Without this detail, the films leave the impression that the Dursleys disappeared unchanged. The books show otherwise. Dudley grew. Petunia and Vernon vanished into the shadows of history, but the last words between the cousins carried weight. A door had been left open, even if only a little. And in a story filled with hatred and war, that tiny opening for reconciliation mattered. Number 8. The Fate of Dolores Umbridge. Dolores Umbridge in the films is remembered for her pink cardigans, kitten plates, and cruel punishments. She is played almost as a grotesque villain, but her true crimes run deeper than what the movies show. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we learn she became head of the Muggle-born Registration Commission. Sitting under a huge ministry seal, she questioned witches and wizards about their blood. Those she judged unworthy were sent to Azkaban. She smiled while destroying lives. After Voldemort's fall, her own turn came. Rowling explained that Umbridge was put on trial for her actions. Testimonies revealed she had stolen wands and papers from innocent people, using them to climb the ministry ladder. She was not a Death Eater, but she did not need to be. Her cruelty, ambition, and loyalty to authority made her just as dangerous. In the end, the same ministry she once served branded her a criminal. The films end without showing her fate. She vanishes from the screen as if swallowed by the chaos of war, but the books give us the satisfaction of knowing she paid the price. A woman who carved scars into Harry's hand with the words, "I must not tell lies," finally faced her own lies exposed in open court. For the readers, it was justice, long overdue. Number 9. Neville's Silent Burden. Neville Longbottom's story carries a weight the films never fully show. His parents, Frank and Alice, were once celebrated auras who fought bravely against Voldemort. But they were captured by Bellatrix Lestrange and tortured with the Cruciatus curse until their minds broke. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Neville takes his friends to St. Mungo's Hospital, where his parents now live. They do not recognize him. They cannot speak to him. They are alive but lost. There is one heartbreaking moment. Alice Longbottom shuffles forward, trembling, and presses a small wrapper from a sweet into Neville's hand. Augusta Longbottom, his stern grandmother, tries to dismiss it, saying, "Throw it away, Neville." But he doesn't. He pockets it carefully. That scrap of paper is all his mother can give, and he treasures it. It is the kind of detail that turns Neville from comic relief into one of the most tragic figures of the story. This pain lives behind his quiet determination. When he raises the sword of Gryffindor in the Deathly Hallows and slays Nagini, it is not just another act of courage in battle. It is the culmination of years of carrying his family's broken legacy. He kills the snake, Voldemort's final Horcrux, with a cry that comes from the very core of his suffering. For Neville, it is not only about defeating evil, it is about giving back the fight his parents could never finish. The films show Neville as clumsy and kind-hearted, finally stepping up when Harry needs him. But the books reveal more. His bravery is born from tragedy. His victory is not a sudden burst of courage, but the natural end of a lifetime of quiet endurance. Neville Longbottom does not simply become a hero, he redeems a family silenced by cruelty, and in doing so he proves that even the most unlikely boy can carry the weight of a war. Number 10. The Hidden Past of Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore appears in the films as the perfect mentor, a calm leader who always knows what to do. But the books reveal a man haunted by mistakes. As a young wizard, he befriended Gellert Grindelwald, and together they dreamed of a new order. They spoke of ruling for the greater good. It was a dangerous vision, and Dumbledore admitted later that he was tempted by it. His brilliance made the idea all the more seductive. Then came the tragedy that defined his life. His sister Ariana, fragile and unstable after an attack by Muggle boys, became the center of a furious duel between Albus Grindelwald and his brother Aberforth. A curse flew. Ariana fell dead. Dumbledore never knew whose spell had killed her. That question poisoned his heart for the rest of his days. In the Deathly Hallows, he confesses to Harry, "I was gifted. I was brilliant. I wanted to escape. I wanted to rule. So I convinced myself that it was for the greater good, and Ariana died, and it was all my fault." This secret explains much of who he became. His fight against Grindelwald years later was not only a battle of power but also a penance. His willingness to sacrifice his own life to let Severus Snape kill him on the astronomy tower came from the same place. He wanted control, but more than that, he wanted to atone. To the public, he was a wise, untouchable figure. To himself, he was a man carrying unbearable guilt. The films skip over this past, showing only the image of the perfect guide. But the books remind us that Dumbledore was deeply human. He could be arrogant, he could be wrong, he could hurt the people he loved most. That truth does not make him smaller. It makes him greater, because in the end, he chose to stand against the darkness he once courted, even if it meant facing it within himself. Number 11, Narcissa Malfoy's decisive role. Narcissa Malfoy knelt beside Harry's body in the Forbidden Forest. Voldemort demanded proof that the boy was dead. She leaned close, and in that moment whispered the only question that mattered to her. "Is Draco alive? Is he in the castle?" Harry answered yes. That was enough. She rose and declared, "He is dead!" Voldemort believed her. The Dark Lord's greatest weapon was fooled by a mother's lie. This act was not born from loyalty to Harry. Narcissa had never cared for him. She despised his friends and the world he represented. But her love for Draco outweighed everything else. By lying, she secured safe passage through the Death Eater's ranks to find her son. That choice, so personal and selfish on the surface, became the turning point of the war. Rowling makes the moment crystal clear in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Narcissa knew the answer, and she stood up. "He is dead," she called to the watchers. Her lie allowed Harry to be carried back to the castle as a corpse. The Death Eaters celebrated too early. Voldemort lowered his guard. Without Narcissa's intervention, Harry would never have had the chance to stand again and face him. It is one of the greatest ironies in the story. A woman who upheld pure blood prejudice and sided with Voldemort's followers became the silent savior. She chose her son over her master. The films show the scene, but brush past its weight. The books reveal its true meaning. Narcissa Malfoy, not a hero by design, was the one who gave Harry the moment he needed to end the Dark Lord forever. Number 12. The unknown side of Aunt Petunia. Aunt Marge, the stern woman with bulldogs who appears in Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban, is often remembered as Petunia Dursley's sister. Yet the books hint that the Dursley family was not as small as the films suggest. Marge is not the only relative who plays a role in Harry's story, even if her presence is brief. Her cruel words about Harry's parents cause him to lose control of his magic and inflate her like a balloon. That moment shows how tangled the Dursleys' family tree really was. What the films never reveal is Petunia's hidden link to the magical world. J.K. Rowling once explained in an interview that Petunia had written to Albus Dumbledore after Lily's death. She wanted answers. She wanted to understand what had happened to her sister. This changes how we see her. Petunia was not only cold and bitter. Deep inside, she carried questions and fears that she never voiced aloud. The books give a clue to this in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. When Petunia suddenly blurts out that she knows about Dementors, everyone is shocked. Vernon roars, "What's that, Petunia?" And she replies quietly, "I heard that awful boy told her, your sister." Herbert Rowling later revealed that this knowledge came not from Severus Snape, but from a letter Dumbledore himself had sent to Petunia. A letter she kept. A letter she never showed anyone. This small detail changes everything. Petunia was not completely blind to magic. She chose to suppress it. She chose jealousy over wonder, bitterness over love. The films show her as nothing more than a cruel aunt, but the books and Rowling's own words uncover another truth. Petunia once reached out and Dumbledore answered. She just never found the courage to admit it. Number 13. Kreacher's Hidden Memories. The figure of Kreacher in the Harry Potter series stands as one of the most overlooked characters when comparing the books to the films. In the movies, Kreacher is presented as little more than a bitter, comic servant of the Black household, muttering curses under his breath and provoking annoyance rather than sympathy. Yet J.K. Rowling's writing presents an entirely different picture, a deeply tragic, complex and essential figure whose story ties directly into one of the most important revelations in the battle against Voldemort. To ignore his depth is to strip away one of the clearest windows into the themes of loyalty, memory, and the weight of heritage that permeate the saga. Kreacher's silence in the films left audiences with a hollow version of the truth, while readers of the books knew that within this aged elf lay secrets that determined the fate of the wizarding world. Kreacher was not merely an accessory to the plot, but the living memory of the Black family. Hidden in the decaying ancestral home at 12 Grimmauld Place, he carried within him the voices, commands, and prejudices of generations of the most aristocratic purebloods. In his muttering, readers could hear the echoes of Walburga Black's screeching portrait and the disdain of a family that once prided itself on blood purity. Yet beyond this bitterness, Kreacher's devotion had a face, and it was not Sirius Black who despised him, but rather Regulus Arcturus Black, Sirius's younger brother. Regulus was the one who treated Kreacher not as a nuisance, but as a companion. This relationship, invisible in the films, is central to understanding both Kreacher's bitterness and his later redemption. The key to Kreacher's tragedy lies in the story of Regulus. The books reveal that Regulus was once a loyal Death Eater, swept into Voldemort's vision of purity and power. But as he grew older, he realized the monstrous nature of the Dark Lord. What turned his loyalty into quiet rebellion was not just ideology, but a moment of horror. Voldemort's reckless use of Kreacher. The elf was forced to test the defenses around the Locket Horcrux in the Cave of Nightmares, where Voldemort made him drink the potion guarding the basin. Kreacher nearly died from the torment, left abandoned and discarded. But Kreacher, bound by magic, managed to return to his master Regulus, who listened to his account. Rowling writes that Kreacher sobbed as he recounted the moment. He went on and on about the potion, how it made him see terrible things. He begged me not to make him drink it again. These words show that Kreacher carried more than bitterness. He carried trauma. Regulus's response to Kreacher's suffering marked his transformation. Unlike Voldemort, who dismissed Kreacher as expendable, Regulus made a plan. He would retrieve the locket, destroy it, and thereby undo the Dark Lord's claim to immortality. But he knew he could not survive. In that same cave, he made Kreacher promise to return with the locket, even as Regulus himself would perish beneath the weight of the potion, and the swarm of inferi that guarded the water. The loyalty of Kreacher in that moment is both heartbreaking and defining. Kreacher obeyed because obedience was his nature, but he never forgot. Regulus whispered, "Take it and go! And you must destroy it, Kreacher! Destroy it!" These words haunted Kreacher long after Regulus was gone. He failed to destroy the locket, lacking the means, and so the elf's life became a long vigil of regret. The films brushed this aside with a passing nod to Regulus's initials carved into the fake locket, but the books make it clear that Kreacher's memory of this event is the very thread that leads Harry to the Horcruxes. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Kreacher tells Harry, Ron, and Hermione the full story of Regulus's sacrifice. Rowling describes Creature's recounting as filled with anguish, his gnarled hands twisting as he relived the loss of the only master who had shown him care. This revelation is not only a key plot point, but also a moment of transformation for Harry. For the first time, Harry sees Creature as more than a bitter servant. He sees him as a creature who bore silent witness to courage and betrayal. The films deny viewers this profound humanization. What makes Creature so compelling is that his grief translates into his loyalty. Once Harry shows him kindness and respect, Creature's allegiance shifts. In the books, Harry does something Sirius never did. He treats Creature as a being with dignity. He gives him the fake locket of Regulus to wear, a gesture that acknowledges Creature's love for his former master. The response is extraordinary. Rowling describes the scene with precision. Creature let out a great sob and cradled the locket to his chest as though it were his most precious treasure. In that moment, Creature becomes Harry's ally, not through domination, but through compassion. It is this act that secures his loyalty, transforming him into an essential part of Harry's mission rather than a reluctant servant. The stark contrast between Sirius and Harry's treatment of Creature also carries thematic weight. Sirius despised the elf, seeing in him the embodiment of the family he loathed. His cruelty only deepened Creature's resentment, and this in turn had deadly consequences. When Sirius mocked him, Creature betrayed him, revealing information that allowed Voldemort to lure Sirius into a trap. Readers saw that small acts of unkindness had great ripples, and that Creature's choices, shaped by how he was treated, had the power to alter the course of the war. The films skimmed over this complexity, leaving audiences with the impression of Creature as a sneering background figure, when in fact he was one of the most pivotal characters in Sirius's downfall. Number 14. The Sacrifice of Tonks and Lupin. Of all the tragedies hidden between the lines of the Harry Potter saga, the loss of Nymphadora Tonks and Remus Lupin stands as one of the most poignant. The films gave us only a passing image, a brief and almost silent moment in the Great Hall where their lifeless bodies lay side by side. Yet in the books their story carried a deeper current of pain, love, and sacrifice. J.K. Rowling allowed readers to feel the burden they carried, the choices they made, and the hope they left behind. The screen, however, stripped that layer of meaning, leaving casual viewers without a full understanding of what this couple represented in the larger fight against darkness. The story of Remus Lupin was always one of shame and isolation. Bitten as a child by Fenrir Greyback, condemned to a life as a werewolf, Lupin grew up knowing rejection as his constant companion. Society never forgave him for something he had no choice in, and he internalized that hatred, building a wall of self-loathing. When he appeared in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban as the compassionate defense against the dark arts professor, readers sensed the quiet melancholy behind his gentle lessons. Harry admired him, but Lupin never believed himself worthy of lasting love or happiness. That weight of stigma is essential to understanding why his eventual marriage to Tonks carried such emotional significance. Nymphadora Tonks, by contrast, was vibrant, clumsy, and brimming with life. Introduced in Order of the Phoenix as a young aura with ever-changing hair, she symbolized resilience and humor, even in the darkest of times. Her feelings for Lupin were no secret in the books. Yet her choice to pursue him was bold, because it defied both social expectation and Lupin's own protests. He resisted her affection with words that cut to the heart of his fear. It would be neither fair nor kind to bind her to the life of a werewolf's wife. He believed she deserved someone free of his curse, someone without danger woven into their very existence. But Tonks refused to bend to that prejudice. She loved him not in spite of his scars, but with full recognition of them. The films did little more than hint at this relationship, presenting Tonks as a background figure, her love and eventual marriage to Lupin left largely in the shadows. In the book Half-Blood Prince, however, their bond unfolds quietly, yet powerfully. Rowling described Tonks's despair as Lupin rejected her again and again, until Albus Dumbledore himself intervened, reminding Lupin that love was never something to be shunned, but embraced. It was a moment of courage on Tonks's part, an act of claiming her future, despite the whispers of others. When she finally married him, it was not only a victory of love, but also a triumph over the bigotry that sought to define Lupin's existence. The war did not grant them peace. In Deathly Hallows, Lupin's fear returned when Tonks became pregnant. His shame reached such a peak that he even tried to abandon her, fleeing to Harry in a misguided attempt to fight while leaving his family behind. That confrontation in Grimmauld Place was one of the most powerful moments of the series, though completely absent from the films. Harry, furious, lashed out. "You're being a coward. You're not thinking of her. You're not thinking of your son. You're only thinking of yourself." Those words cut through Lupin's self-doubt, forcing him to face the truth that love and responsibility could not be discarded in the name of fear. Without that scene, the audience misses Lupin's most human battle, the struggle to believe himself worthy of fatherhood. Their child, Edward Teddy Lupin, was born into a world of chaos, but also into a legacy of resilience. In the books, Lupin later appears at Shell Cottage, his face illuminated by joy as he announces his son's birth. "Tonks has had the baby," he exclaims, telling Harry that Teddy inherited Tonks's ability to change his hair color. It is a fleeting but radiant moment, reminding readers that life continues even in the shadow of war. The films gave no space to this joy, no glimpse of the hope the child represented. Instead, viewers jumped directly from the battles to the silence of death, never seeing the fragile thread of continuity that Rowling placed at the heart of the story. When the Battle of Hogwarts came, Tonks and Lupin fought side by side. Their deaths were not given dramatic spotlight. Rowling chose to reveal them almost quietly, as if grief had grown too heavy to shout. Harry's eyes fell upon their still forms in the great hall. Lying side by side, hands still touching, were Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. The simplicity of the description carried a crushing weight. They were not martyrs celebrated with speeches. They were two people who wanted to raise their child together, cut down before they had the chance. The films retained only this image, flashing by with no explanation, no pause for the grief that should have followed. Number 15, The Disappearance of Fawkes. Fawkes, the phoenix of Albus Dumbledore, is one of the most mysterious creatures in the Harry Potter series, yet the films reduce him to a single heroic moment and then let him vanish without explanation. In the pages of J.K. Rowling's books, Fawkes is far more than a convenient plot device. He is a living metaphor, a symbol of loyalty, renewal and grief, whose destiny is tied not only to Dumbledore but also to Harry himself. His silent flight after the headmaster's death is not accidental, nor is his role in the Chamber of Secrets a one-time miracle. The story of Harry Potter is incomplete without understanding Fawkes's hidden role, and the absence of this narrative in the films strips away a layer of depth that Rowling carefully wove into the saga. When Harry faces the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, his death seems inevitable. Tom Riddle mocks him, declaring that you will lose your life this time. But Fawkes arrives in the darkness, bringing light and hope. His scarlet wings break the shadow as he blinds the basilisk, gouging out its deadly eyes. He then drops the sorting hat at Harry's feet, allowing him to draw forth the sword of Gryffindor. This moment is not simply chance. Dumbledore once said, "Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." Fawkes embodies that promise, carrying both deliverance and strength. It is the Phoenix's tears falling on Harry's poisoned wound that allow him to rise and defeat the monster. The films capture this event visually, but they fail to explain its deeper significance. Fawkes is not just rescuing Harry, he is establishing the bond between Harry and Dumbledore's legacy. In the book, Fawkes's healing tears are described with reverence. Great, pearly drops were falling onto Harry's arm, where the basilisk's venom had entered. These tears do not merely close a wound, they symbolize rebirth. Just as the phoenix dies in fire only to rise from the ashes, so Harry survives what should have been certain death. This echoes the larger theme of the series. Harry himself is reborn again and again, surviving where others fall. The tears are not accidental magic. They are an extension of Fawkes's nature, a reminder that in the darkest moment of despair, renewal is possible. Fawkes's gift of the sword is another act that reveals his hidden role. The sword of Gryffindor could not have appeared without his intervention. In the Chamber of Secrets, Rowling makes it clear that only a true Gryffindor could have drawn it from the sorting hat, and only Fawkes could have delivered it to Harry in time. The bird becomes the bridge between Gryffindor's legacy and Dumbledore's trust in Harry. This is not merely assistance in battle, but an affirmation. Harry is worthy of wielding the ancient weapon of his house founder. In the films, this is shown without commentary, leaving many viewers unaware of how deliberate and meaningful the act is. The depth of Fawkes's connection to Dumbledore is revealed most powerfully after the headmaster's death. Rowling does not let this moment pass unnoticed. She writes in The Half-Blood Prince, "And he knew without being told that it was Fawkes's lament, the phoenix song that was Harry's grief, given voice." The bird's sorrow becomes the soundtrack of the funeral, echoing through the air as if the very spirit of Hogwarts itself is mourning. Fawkes is not just any creature. He embodies the loyalty and soul of Dumbledore. His disappearance afterward is not casual. With the wizard's death, the bond that tied him to the human world is broken, and so he departs, carrying with him the end of an era. The films erase this poignant scene, and in doing so they silence the voice of grief that Fawkes represents. By not showing the lament, the visual story removes the symbolic closure that the book gives its readers. Dumbledore's funeral becomes one more solemn scene without the depth of mythical sorrow. Yet in the novel, the phoenix's cry makes the loss unforgettable, lingering like an ache in the heart. It is the moment when readers understand that Dumbledore's absence will not only affect Harry, but the entire fabric of the magical world. It is important to note that Fawkes's disappearance has no cynicism in it. Some might assume abandonment, but the books emphasize that this is the nature of the Phoenix. Fawkes was bound to Dumbledore by a bond of loyalty, and with that life extinguished, his time in Hogwarts came to a natural end. The Phoenix does not linger where his heart no longer belongs. The song of mourning was his last gift, both to Dumbledore and to those who loved him. The symbolism is clear. Even immortal creatures must acknowledge death, and their grief is no less real. By ignoring this in the films, a central metaphor is lost. Fawkes is the reminder that loss is universal, that even beings of fire and eternity know sorrow. For Harry, hearing that lament ties him forever to Dumbledore's memory, reminding him of the cost of the war against Voldemort. Rowling carefully layers this moment as part of Harry's emotional journey. He must face the fight without his mentor, guided only by the memory of what Dumbledore stood for. Fawkes's cry is the closing curtain of Harry's childhood. From that moment he carries the burden alone. Number 16, Hermione's parents in exile. The story of Hermione Granger's parents remains one of the most overlooked mysteries in the cinematic adaptation of Harry Potter. While audiences remember a single haunting image in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, where Hermione raises her wand and erases herself from the family photographs, the true depth of this act is never explained. In the novels, however, J.K. Rowling paints a far more harrowing picture. Hermione did not simply erase her parents' memories of her existence. She rewrote their lives entirely, giving them new names, Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and implanting within them a desire to leave England behind to settle in Australia. This was not an act of selfishness or abandonment, but the most extreme act of love imaginable, a daughter ensuring that those she cared for most would be out of reach of Voldemort's grasp. What makes this episode so powerful in the books is the permanence that Hermione intended. She never performed this charm with the hope that she would later undo it. Her sacrifice was designed to be final. When she whispers, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to go and live in Australia," in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the weight of that confession falls heavily upon Harry and Ron. It is not merely an inconvenience or precaution, it is Hermione's private tragedy, one that she bears silently. The films, eager to maintain pace and spectacle, show us a brief montage but deny us the fullness of Hermione's pain. The book's version forces readers to imagine the terror of sitting across from your own parents and deliberately severing their love for you, replacing it with a dream that is not theirs but yours, to protect them. There is something haunting about the names Wendell and Monica Wilkins. They are ordinary, harmless, almost bland names, chosen precisely because they would draw no attention in the wizarding world. Hermione, ever meticulous, gave her parents new identities that would ensure they vanished into obscurity. The tragedy is that they were never consulted, never asked, never given the choice. And yet, this violation was born from the purest desire to keep them safe. It is a paradox of Hermione's character, the girl who fought so fiercely for freedom and fairness in SPEW, and for the rights of magical creatures, also robbed her own parents of their autonomy. This moral contradiction was a deliberate choice by Rowling, adding complexity to Hermione's character and demonstrating that in war, even the most righteous are forced to commit acts that would otherwise horrify them. After the war, Rowling confirmed that Hermione travelled to Australia to restore her parents' memories. But it was not, as some readers might imagine, a simple counter-charm. It was a painstaking process of rebuilding trust, of piecing together fractured lives. Imagine Wendell and Monica suddenly finding themselves back in England, stripped of the false memories of their Australian life, and confronted with a young woman claiming to be their daughter. The psychological trauma of such an experience cannot be overstated. Rowling herself noted that the process of restoration took time and that healing was gradual. Hermione did not wave her wand and watch them smile in recognition. She had to live with the guilt, the awkward silences, the disbelief in their eyes, till the warmth of memory returned. It is a detail the films discarded, preferring the neatness of spectacle to the discomfort of reality. The absence of this narrative in the films is not a small omission, it is a lost dimension of Hermione's character. For viewers who only know the cinematic Hermione, she is defined by her intelligence, her bravery, and her loyalty to Harry and Ron. But book readers know that beneath her composure lies a private grief, one that mirrors Harry's own loss of family. The difference is that Harry's parents were taken from him, while Hermione chose to take herself away from her parents. This act of agency, twisted by necessity, makes her sacrifice more complex. She is not the orphaned child of fate, but the self-orphaned soldier of a cause greater than herself. The films also deny us the symbolic significance of Hermione's choice. By giving her parents the dream of moving to Australia, she effectively banished them to the other side of the world. Australia, distant and sun-soaked, becomes a metaphor for safety, a place untouched by Voldemort's terror. Yet it is also an exile. Hermione sends them far beyond her reach, not knowing if she will ever see them again. The reader understands that this is the equivalent of writing herself out of her parents' story. And for a girl whose greatest strength was knowledge and memory, this deliberate erasure becomes a kind of self-betrayal. She is both the keeper of memory and the destroyer of it. There is also an understated irony in Hermione's act. Throughout the series, memory plays a central role. The pensieve allows Dumbledore to review memories with perfect clarity. Harry learns the truth about Snape through the memory he shares in the final book. Even Tom Riddle, the boy who would become Voldemort, leaves fragments of his soul, preserved in objects that embody memory and immortality. In such a world, Hermione's rewriting of her parents' lives is a dark echo of the very magic that defines the series. Memory is both power and vulnerability, and in altering it, Hermione stepped into morally ambiguous territory usually reserved for antagonists. Yet because she did so out of love, readers forgive her. The films, by omitting this, strip away the moral weight and leave us only with a sentimental image. Consider also the emotional parallel between Hermione's parents and Neville Longbottom's. Neville's parents, tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange, are physically present but mentally unreachable. They cannot remember their son, cannot share in his triumphs, and cannot recognize his love. Hermione, in a chillingly similar way, made her parents unreachable by choice. Both stories explore the devastating impact of memory on the bonds of family, and both highlight the sacrifices demanded by the war against Voldemort. But where Neville is a victim of cruelty, Hermione is the author of her own tragedy. This comparison, so rich in the books, vanishes entirely in the cinematic version. When Rowling explained in interviews that restoring her parents' memories was not instantaneous, she forced readers to confront the aftermath of war. Victory is rarely clean. There are consequences, long-term scars, and relationships forever altered. Hermione's return to her parents was not the joyful reunion of a war hero with her family. It was a slow, painful negotiation of identity. Who are Wendell and Monica Wilkins now? Do they remember the dreams they had as Mr. and Mrs. Granger? And what becomes of the months or years they spent in Australia, living lives that never truly belonged to them? These questions deepen the tragedy and elevate Hermione's sacrifice beyond a mere plot device. It is worth noting that Rowling never describes this reunion in detail within the main narrative. She leaves it to the reader's imagination, supplemented by her later commentary. This absence is itself a narrative choice, allowing Hermione's sacrifice to remain hauntingly incomplete. We know she succeeded, but we do not see how. The gap forces us to reflect on what it means to alter another's mind and then attempt to restore it. It invites us to consider the fragility of memory and the resilience of love, and it compels us to acknowledge that Hermione's victory, like the larger victory over Voldemort, came at a cost too easily ignored by those who view only the films. The cinematic omission also robs Emma Watson's portrayal of Hermione of one of its most powerful dramatic opportunities. Imagine the performance, Hermione returning to Australia, knocking on a door behind which her parents live in contented ignorance, introducing herself as their daughter, and waiting as doubt and disbelief war with recognition in their eyes. It could have been a scene of quiet devastation, a counterpoint to the grand battles and explosions that dominate the final films. Instead, the audience is left with a fragmentary image, a suggestion of pain without resolution. The loss is not only Hermione's but ours as well, for we are denied the chance to witness the full measure of her courage. By exploring Hermione's decision, the books also highlight the difference between the magical and the mundane. Mr. and Mrs. Granger were dentists, grounded in the practical and scientific world. For them, life was measured in patience and appointments, not in curses and dark lords. The intrusion of magic into their lives came not by choice, but through their daughter's birthright. Hermione's final act before going on the run was to protect them from a war they could not possibly understand. In doing so, she demonstrated the tension between the magical and the Muggle worlds. Wizards often condescend to Muggles, treating them as oblivious or irrelevant. Hermione's sacrifice shows that Muggles matter profoundly, for they are the anchors of identity, the ones who shaped her into who she is. Yet paradoxically, she erased that very influence to keep them safe. The erasure of this subplot in the films also affects how we perceive Hermione's maturity. The Hermione of the books is not simply clever, she is burdened, pragmatic, and willing to shoulder unbearable responsibilities. She makes choices that even adults might fear to contemplate. She embodies the theme that war forces the young to grow old before their time. Without the depth of her parents' storyline, the film version of Hermione appears heroic, but less tragic, intelligent, but less morally tested. The books give us a young woman who must live with the knowledge that she rewrote her parents' very lives. That knowledge cannot be erased, not even with magic. Ultimately, the secret of Hermione's parents is not merely about what she did to them, but about what it reveals of her character. She is the girl who loved too fiercely to allow her parents to remain vulnerable. She is the strategist who thought beyond the immediate battle to the broader consequences. She is also the daughter who bore the pain of absence in silence, never seeking sympathy or recognition. In this, she mirrors the countless unsung sacrifices of war, those acts of quiet bravery that never make it into the headlines but define the human cost of conflict. The films, by simplifying her story, stripped away this essential truth. The books preserve it, leaving readers with the haunting image of Wendell and Monica Wilkins walking under the Australian sun, blissfully unaware that their real daughter was fighting for the survival of the world. Number 17, The Forgotten Professor Binns. Of all the characters erased in the cinematic adaptation of Harry Potter, none is as strangely significant as Professor Cuthbert Binns, the ghostly teacher of history of magic. His absence may seem minor at first glance, yet it hides a subtle but important shift in the tone and texture of Hogwarts itself. In the novels, Binns is a relic of a world that never fully leaves the living, a spectral scholar who continues to lecture long after his body has given up on existence. By omitting him, the films lost a thread that tied together. Humor, horror, and the absurdity of magical life. To understand the full depth of this omission, one must return to the moment when Binns, without realizing he had died, drifted out of his armchair by the fireplace and into the classroom, leaving his lifeless body behind. It is this absurd, almost comic death that shapes the peculiarity of his character, a detail that J.K. Rowling describes with deliberate irony. Here was a man so committed to his subject that not even death could stop his monotonous lectures. Rowling portrays Binns not only as comic relief, but as a symbol of the lifelessness of history when it is taught without passion. Students find his lectures unbearably dull, not because magic itself is boring, but because Binns reduces even the most legendary battles and mysterious curses into droning facts. Hermione Granger, ever the eager student, attempts to listen intently, but even she admits that Binns has the power to drain energy from the room. Harry himself observes how the ghost's high, wheezy voice droned on and on while his classmates' heads drooped lower and lower. The paradox lies in the fact that such a ghost is chosen to reveal one of the most thrilling mysteries of Hogwarts, the tale of the Chamber of Secrets. By placing this revelation in his hands, Rowling crafted an intentional contrast between the grandeur of the legend and the lifelessness of the man who delivers it. The legend itself comes alive in Book 2 when Harry and his friends, desperate for answers, ask Professor Binns about the fabled chamber. At first he resists, insisting that the story is simply a piece of nonsense meant to entertain young witches and wizards. Yet under pressure, he reluctantly recounts the tale of the founders of Hogwarts, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. According to Binns, while the first three believed Hogwarts should be open to all magical children, Slytherin held that only those of pure bloodline deserved admission. The clash of ideologies led to Slytherin's departure, and the whispered legend of a hidden chamber sealed with a monster left to purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy. This moment, recounted in Binns's weary tone, stands as one of the great ironies of the series. The most chilling piece of Hogwarts lore is delivered by the dullest voice in the castle. The films, however, remove this scene entirely and instead give the responsibility of recounting the legend to Professor McGonagall. While Dame Maggie Smith delivers the tale with her characteristic gravitas, the scene loses the peculiar irony and humour Rowling wove into the books. McGonagall's version is sober and authoritative, perfectly fitting her personality, yet it lacks the absurd charm of Binns's reluctant disclosure. The switch changes not only the pacing but the very mood of the story. Instead of the unnerving comedy of a ghost dismissing what turns out to be deadly truth, the audience receives a straightforward exposition. This decision streamlines the narrative for film, but erases one of the book's memorable contrasts, that sometimes wisdom, even when reluctantly offered, emerges from the most lifeless of voices. Professor Binns himself is a study in contradictions. Though a ghost, he clings to the structure of the living world, arriving punctually, lecturing dutifully, and ignoring the fact that no student can bear his teaching. His character embodies a kind of parody of academic tradition, a man so consumed by rote history that he forgets he has died. The detail of his death, falling asleep by the fire and waking up as a ghost, is not merely comic but emblematic. Rowling deliberately undercuts the drama of death with banality. Most ghosts in the series, from nearly headless Nick to the Grey Lady, carry deep stories of regret or trauma. Binns alone embodies the opposite. Death was so trivial to him that it barely registered. This is an important thread in the larger tapestry of the magical world, reminding readers that even mortality bends before the absurd logic of Hogwarts. The significance of Binns's teaching extends beyond his own character. He represents how history itself can be mishandled. In a world full of rich legends and dramatic conflicts, Binns reduces the vibrant past into dust-dry recitation. When Hermione asks him if the chamber might be real, he waves it off as utter nonsense. The irony is sharp. A ghost, living proof that myths and impossibilities are true, dismisses a myth that turns out to be terrifyingly real. This gap between what adults in the magical world dismiss and what children discover drives much of the series' tension. By having Binns deny the chamber, Rowling positions him as both an obstacle and an accidental herald of truth. One must not overlook how his absence from the films also erases a subtle critique of education itself. Rowling's portrait of Binns lampoons the kind of teachers who recite material without passion, who transform living history into dead facts. Students do not fail to learn because the material is uninteresting, but because the delivery kills the spirit of curiosity. In transferring the legend to McGonagall, the films turn this critique into a straightforward scene of authority. McGonagall is respected, admired, and even feared. When she tells the tale, students listen, but in the book, when Binns tells the story, students barely keep their eyes open, and the gravity of the chamber must fight its way through his monotone. This tension between the dullness of the narrator and the horror of the tale makes the scene memorable and unique. Consider also the way Binns's story frames Slytherin himself. Through the ghost's reluctant telling, Slytherin becomes less of a villain and more of a shadowy figure lost in the haze of legend. The vagueness of Binns's account mirrors the uncertainty surrounding the chamber. Was it truly real? Was Slytherin's monster merely a myth? Binns's insistence that it is a fairy tale lulls the students into temporary skepticism, making the later attacks by the basilisk all the more shocking. The films, by contrast, treat the chamber as unquestionable fact from the outset, robbing the story of the same gradual unfolding of dread. The humour in Binns's character also reinforces the tone of Hogwarts as a place where the absurd lives side by side with the terrifying. Ghosts glide through hallways, staircases shift, portraits talk, and yet perhaps the most surreal of all is the teacher who does not realize he is dead. His role as the narrator of the chamber legend underlines Rowling's theme that truth often comes from unlikely sources, wrapped in banality, waiting for curious minds to grasp it. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione hear the story from Binns, the sense of unease comes not only from the legend itself, but from the realization that even the dullest figure may hold the key to their survival. It is worth remembering how Rowling describes the students' reaction to his lectures. It was a common experience for students to fall asleep in Professor Binns's class and wake up with ink stains on their faces. This description amplifies the absurdity of the ghost's continued existence. He is a man so unchanging, so fixed in his habits, that he ignores even the laughter or snores of his students. By juxtaposing this comic monotony with a chilling story about a monster stalking the school, Rowling creates a layered scene that is at once funny, eerie, and foreboding. It is precisely this layering that the films flatten by assigning the task to McGonagall. Binns also serves as a narrative foil to the more animated professors. Severus Snape injects menace and sarcasm into every potion lesson. Minerva McGonagall blends sternness with flashes of dry wit. Even Sybil Trelawney with her wild predictions brings eccentric energy to the classroom. In contrast, Binns is defined by absence, no tone, no energy, no awareness of anything beyond his lecture notes. Yet paradoxically, he becomes unforgettable precisely because of this lifelessness. His ghostly presence is an exaggeration of academic detachment, and Rowling uses him to show how the world of Hogwarts is never without its bizarre extremes. The omission of Binns also alters the sense of Hogwarts as a living, breathing place with countless oddities tucked into its corners. Each ghost in the novels carries thematic weight. The Grey Lady embodies regret, the Bloody Baron violence, Nearly Headless Nick comic tragedy. Binns, by contrast, embodies inertia, the refusal to change, the persistence of the past long after it has ceased to matter. His classroom is a metaphorical graveyard of knowledge where facts lose their power because they are delivered without soul. Without him, the films depict Hogwarts as a cleaner, more streamlined place, less haunted by the strange quirks that make the school feel so real. The mystery of the Chamber of Secrets loses some of its irony in this cinematic change. In the book, students hear the tale from someone who dismisses it outright, and the tension arises from the contrast between adult denial and child discovery. In the film, students are told by McGonagall in serious tones, leaving less room for doubt. Rowling's narrative choice added layers of skepticism, humour, and absurdity that heightened the suspense. The films, pressed for time, replaced complexity with clarity, but at the cost of atmosphere. Binns remains a figure that lingers in the imagination precisely because he is absent from the screen. Readers remember him not for what he hardly does anything, but for what he represents. He is the ghost who denies ghosts of the past. He is the teacher who forgot he died. He is the narrator who refuses to believe in the very legend he is forced to tell. Through his monotony, Rowling weaves irony, comedy, and dread. Though the films erased him, the books preserve his spectral droning, a reminder that sometimes the strangest secrets of Harry Potter are hidden not in dark chambers, but in the overlooked details of classrooms where even death is not enough to stop a lecture. Number 18, Voldemort's Fragmented Soul. Under the dim glow of candlelight, Voldemort's true secret lies not in his terrifying wand skills or his commanding presence, but in the terrible decision he once made as Tom Riddle, a decision that twisted his fate forever. The films show him as a figure of raw power, a near unstoppable villain, but the books carefully reveal what lay beneath that power, an obsession with immortality so unnatural that it tore his soul apart. That obsession was not simply about surviving death, but about rewriting the very laws of magic, laws that had stood inviolate for centuries. This is what the films only hint at with his disfigured face and serpentine body, while J.K. Rowling's words give us the explanation that makes him more horrifying than any spell he could cast. The Horcruxes, objects infused with fragments of a wizard's soul, were known to exist in the shadows of magical history, whispered about with fear and disgust. Before Voldemort, only the darkest witches and wizards dared to tamper with such abominations, and even then the records are vague, the warnings severe. Slughorn, the genial potions master, becomes the unwilling gatekeeper of this knowledge when young Tom Riddle, handsome and charismatic, presses him with questions. Rowling describes the moment with quiet dread in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. "How do you split your soul?" Tom asks, his tone hungry and eager. Slughorn stammers, admitting that no one had ever considered more than one. In that single conversation, Voldemort's path becomes clear. He would go further than anyone before him, and in doing so he would destroy not only his humanity but his very form. The films show Horcruxes as dangerous objects to be destroyed, but they rarely pause to consider the unspeakable process that created them. Rowling emphasizes that to make even one Horcrux, the wizard must commit murder, for murder is the ultimate act of ripping the soul. Voldemort committed this act not once, not twice, but 7 times, each time breaking himself further. By the time Harry meets him in the graveyard in Goblet of Fire, Voldemort's soul is already fragmented beyond recognition. The pale, hairless creature crawling from the cauldron is not just the product of a ritual, but the visual embodiment of his damaged essence. This grotesque appearance is no accident. It is magic reflecting the corruption of the spirit within. It is Dumbledore who tells Harry the depth of Voldemort's crime, for even Harry cannot at first comprehend it. He has pushed his soul to the very limit, Dumbledore says in Half-Blood Prince. He has mutilated it in a way no one has ever dared. That word Mutilated shocks the reader more than any duel ever could. The soul, something unseen, becomes a tangible thing, wounded and bleeding from each dark act. The films show a villain whose face is flat, whose eyes are red, but the books whisper the reason behind this monstrous visage. His soul could no longer sustain the human mask. The chilling truth is that Voldemort's power was never only about spells. Others could duel, others could kill, but no one else dared to become unkillable by this path. Horcruxes turned him into something neither living nor dead, a shadow anchored to the world by cursed objects. Each one, the diary that bewitched Ginny, the locket that spread despair, the ring that cursed Dumbledore, was not merely a trinket of dark magic, but a vessel of Voldemort's being. The films present these as plot devices, tasks for Harry and his friends to complete. Yet the books explain the horror. Each Horcrux screamed when destroyed because a living piece of Voldemort was being torn apart. Rowling gives us a particularly haunting image in Deathly Hallows when Harry enters the limbo-like King's Cross and sees what is left of Voldemort's soul. The small, shriveled, childlike creature whimpering beneath a seat is the ultimate evidence of his spiritual disfigurement. This detail never makes its way into the films with the same clarity. In the books, readers are forced to reckon with the idea that Voldemort's choices left him so scarred that even in death his soul could not heal. What we see in his body is only a reflection of that invisible ruin. The significance of Voldemort being the first to attempt multiple Horcruxes cannot be overstated. He did not stumble upon the method by accident. He deliberately researched it, pursued it, and executed it. Where others feared one Horcrux might already condemn them, Voldemort carved his soul into 7. His reasoning was chillingly mathematical. 7 was the most powerful magical number, and in that belief he anchored his fate. His logic was cold, but it was also deeply flawed. Each act of division left him weaker, less tethered to humanity. When he eventually created Nagini as a living Horcrux, the very boundary between man and beast blurred, marking the point of no return. The films touch on his obsession with Nagini, but they leave unexplored the true horror of making a living creature into a Horcrux. In the books, the bond between Voldemort and the snake is described as unnatural, a relationship forged not out of loyalty but magical domination. When Neville slices through Nagini's neck in the final battle, it is not only the destruction of a weapon but the severing of the last thread holding Voldemort to this world. That moment is not simply a victory of courage, but a metaphysical unraveling of the unnatural chains Voldemort forged for himself. The question then arises, why did the films not explain this fully? Perhaps because the horror of mutilating one's own soul is not something easily captured on screen. It requires words, explanations, the patience of a reader willing to peer into the abyss. The films showed Voldemort's pale body, his strange, inhuman features, but they did not tell us that these were symptoms of the corruption eating him from within. Without the context of Horcruxes as spiritual mutilation, the audience is left with only half the truth. Voldemort is terrifying in the films, but he is tragic in the books. It is also telling that Voldemort's enemies, especially Dumbledore, recognized this weakness even when others saw only power. Dumbledore understood that Voldemort had made himself less than human. Perhaps it is what we fear most that we are drawn to, he muses, pointing out that Voldemort's obsession with conquering death left him chained to it more tightly than anyone else. In trying to outwit mortality, Voldemort shackled himself to objects that could be destroyed, leaving his fate in the hands of teenagers willing to risk everything. This irony, rich and cruel, is muted in the films but burns brightly in Rowling's text. Harry's victory is not just the triumph of bravery over fear or good over evil, it is the triumph of wholeness over fragmentation. Voldemort split his soul again and again, while Harry, though scarred and wounded, kept his soul intact. Even when forced to accept death in the Forbidden Forest, Harry refused to cling to life by unnatural means. That contrast is the moral center of the story. Voldemort's power was immense, but it was hollow. The films portray the battle as a duel of wands. The books show it as a battle of philosophies, a struggle between one who mutilated his soul and one who preserved it. Consider the way Voldemort reacts when his Horcruxes are destroyed. In Deathly Hallows, Rowling describes him as screaming with rage, a sound that was terrible to hear. He is not simply angry at losing weapons, he is losing himself, piece by piece. Each shattered Horcrux brings him closer to mortality, closer to the fate he feared most. This is the great secret. Voldemort's true weakness was never Harry's scar or even the prophecy. It was his own choices, the way he mutilated his soul until nothing was left to sustain him. The films, by necessity of time and visual language, chose to focus on the action, the chases, the duels. But the books linger on the consequences of choices, the metaphysical cost of evil. Voldemort was terrifying not only because he could kill with a flick of his wand, but because he was willing to corrupt the very essence of existence to evade death. That corruption consumed him, made him less than human, and left him vulnerable in ways no spell could protect against. This is the hidden layer, the secret the films did not explain. Voldemort was destroyed not by Harry's wand, but by his own broken soul. When readers close the final book, they carry not only the image of Harry victorious, but the haunting reminder of what Voldemort became. His pale body collapsing in the Great Hall is only the end of the story. The true tragedy lies in the shriveled creature Harry saw in King's Cross, the permanent scar of choices made long before. That image lingers longer than any duel. A once brilliant boy, Tom Riddle, who believed he could master death, reduced to a shadow, unloved, unredeemed, and unable to heal. It is this image that makes the story unforgettable and reveals the depth hidden beneath the surface of the films. Number 19. The overlooked role of Arthur Weasley. Arthur Weasley is often remembered by movie audiences as the quirky, gentle father who could never resist tinkering with plugs, rubber ducks, or the latest Muggle invention he stumbled across. He was a character meant to provide levity, a man whose fascination with the ordinary charmed viewers while offering a warm counterbalance to the darker events of the series. Yet the films left out a vital layer of his story, a layer that revealed not only his courage but also his significance in the struggle against Voldemort. To understand Arthur Weasley properly, one must turn back to the books, where his actions and fate cast him in a far more serious light, one that the movies only faintly suggest but never fully embrace. In the books, Arthur was never just the eccentric ministry worker with a cluttered shed of car parts and enchanted plugs. He was deeply embedded in the Order of the Phoenix, a group committed to resisting Voldemort at the cost of their own safety. This detail, often brushed over in the films, positioned him as far more than a loving father. Arthur was one of the Order's quiet bridges between the official channels of wizarding authority and the underground fight against darkness. His post at the Ministry of Magic within the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office might have seemed trivial, but it gave him access to information, contacts, and the corridors of power. Dumbledore relied on members like Arthur precisely because they could operate inside systems that Voldemort sought to corrupt. The novels paint Arthur as a man constantly straddling the dangerous line between loyalty to his job and loyalty to the greater mission of protecting the wizarding world. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Arthur's presence at the Ministry became one of the Order's strongest footholds in enemy territory. He could observe, report, and move around in ways that most members could not. It was a subtle but crucial role, one that carried far greater weight than simply patching up enchanted kettles. Rowling shows us that Arthur's post was no accident. In a world where Fudge's ministry refused to acknowledge Voldemort's return, Arthur's silent vigilance was one of the few ways truth seeped into the halls of power. But it is in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix where Arthur's importance takes on its darkest and most dramatic turn. While guarding the Department of Mysteries, a place that symbolized the very heart of the magical world's greatest secrets, he becomes the victim of a vicious attack. The moment is described with chilling precision. The snake's fangs were buried deep in Mr. Weasley's side. Blood was splattering to the floor, his glasses askew, his face white with shock. The attack was not just an assault on a beloved father figure, it was the culmination of Voldemort's invasive link with Harry, using Nagini as a weapon and Harry as an unwilling witness. Through Harry's eyes, readers were dragged into the horror of seeing Arthur on the brink of death, a brutal reminder that no character was truly safe. The films, however, erased this moment entirely, opting to move past it as though it had little consequence. By omitting it, the stakes of the war lost a significant human cost. In the novels, Arthur's near-death experience was a turning point for Harry, who realized that the scar on his forehead was not just a remnant of Voldemort's curse, but a living tether between himself and the Dark Lord. Harry's agony at witnessing the attack could not be understated. He shouted, "He's got Ron's dad! He's got Mr. Weasley!" in a desperate attempt to save Arthur's life. The attack created a chain reaction, forcing Dumbledore to act swiftly, exposing the Order's vigilance and reminding every reader that the war was escalating beyond control. Arthur's survival was a miracle, but it did not erase the gravity of what happened. Rowling used this moment to shift the narrative's tone. The Weasleys, until then, had often been a source of comfort and comic relief for both Harry and the readers. But, with Arthur bleeding out on the floor of the Ministry, the Weasleys were thrust into the war's brutality. Molly Weasley's terror and the family's anguish grounded the conflict in painful reality. Arthur was no longer just the man tinkering with Muggle batteries. He was a father who had almost been taken from his children, a soldier whose blood had nearly been spilled in the defense of the wizarding world. The omission of this episode from the films did more than rob Arthur of his complexity. It stripped away one of the narrative's sharpest reminders that war spares no one. In the book, Harry's guilt was palpable. He wondered if he was the one responsible, since Voldemort had used his mind to channel the attack. This doubt haunted Harry, planting seeds of mistrust in himself that would bloom in later chapters. It was a psychological battle as much as a physical one. Without Arthur's attack, the movies glossed over Harry's internal torment, and with it, the profound connection between Harry's mind and Voldemort's sinister designs. Arthur's role as a victim also revealed Dumbledore's foresight and strategy. After the attack, Dumbledore shifted his tactics with Harry, isolating him from further influence, which led to the controversial decision of having Snape teach him occlumency. The chain of events that unfolded from that night in the Department of Mysteries was crucial to the trajectory of the entire series. Arthur's blood on the floor was the trigger that reshaped how Harry fought the war within himself. By excising it, the films cut short an arc that tied Arthur, Dumbledore, Harry and Voldemort together in one of the series' most intricate webs. The attack also underscored Arthur's silent bravery. He had accepted the dangerous task of guarding the Department of Mysteries, fully aware of the risks. Rowling never painted him as a warrior like Mad-Eye Moody or a duelist like Sirius Black, but his courage lay in his constancy. Arthur was a man who showed up, who did what was needed, and who carried the burden of protecting his family while fighting for a cause larger than himself. His brand of heroism was quiet, almost invisible, but no less vital. When he nearly lost his life to Nagini, it was a testament to the sacrifices made by those who never sought glory but gave everything anyway. What is most striking is how the Weasley children viewed their father in the aftermath. Fred and George, known for their pranks, were shaken into silence. Ron, usually so casual about his parents, confronted the possibility of losing his father with raw fear. Ginny, too, revealed her deep love for him. Arthur's brush with death deepened every member of the family, reminding readers that behind the laughter and chaos of the burrow was a bond strong enough to withstand even the fangs of Voldemort's serpent. Rowling crafted the Weasleys not as untouchable comic relief, but as the emotional heart of the series. Arthur's attack exposed that heart to the battlefield. It is no exaggeration to say that the attack on Arthur Weasley reshaped the series' emotional landscape. For Harry, it was the first time he saw, in vivid and horrifying detail, the consequences of being connected to Voldemort. For the Order, it was proof that their missions carried mortal danger. For the Weasleys, it was a moment that brought them closer to death's shadow than ever before. And for readers, it was a shock that stripped away any illusion that Rowling's world would keep its beloved characters safe. Arthur's near death was as much a warning as it was a narrative device. The war was real, and anyone could fall. The absence of this pivotal event from the films left Arthur Weasley's cinematic portrayal incomplete. Viewers never saw him as more than the cheerful, eccentric patriarch. They were denied the chance to watch him bleed for the cause, to see his family broken by the possibility of losing him, and to recognize the depth of his involvement in the fight. What remained on screen was a man defined by comic curiosity, when the truth was that he had nearly been a martyr for the Order. His survival gave the story one of its rare mercies, but it also raised the stakes in a way the films never allowed. Arthur Weasley's hidden role, his connection to the Ministry, his near sacrifice in the Department of Mysteries, and his position as a bridge between the mundane and the extraordinary, remains one of the saga's greatest secrets overlooked by the adaptations. In the novels, he was more than a father. He was a soldier, a spy, a target, and almost a casualty of war. He embodied the quiet strength that so many ordinary people contribute in times of crisis, a reminder that heroism often hides in the most unassuming of places. The movies may have left this unspoken, but in the books, Arthur's story was written in blood and resilience, a thread woven deeply into the fabric of Harry Potter's war. Number 20, the prophecy's double meaning. Under the dim shadows of the Department of Mysteries, a truth lingered that shaped the fate of the wizarding world, though few fully understood it. The prophecy delivered by Sybil Trelawney, clumsily uttered during her interview at the Hog's Head, was not a simple roadmap carved into stone, but a riddle draped in ambiguity. Readers who turned the pages of Order of the Phoenix discovered that the prophecy did not declare Harry James Potter as the sole saviour, but instead left a dangerous openness. 2 children, born as the 7th month died, could fit its description. The film simplified this detail into destiny, but Rowling's pages gave us something richer, the unsettling realization that Voldemort's fear, not fate, had made Harry the chosen one. The words Trelawney spoke, recorded in Dumbledore's pensive, are as follows. "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. This phrasing is vague, a puzzle with missing pieces. Both Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom met its conditions. Both were born in late July. Both were born to parents who had stood against Voldemort on 3 occasions. And yet, only one was marked, quite literally, as Voldemort's equal. The Dark Lord himself, through paranoia and obsession, pointed his wand at a baby's crib and branded his enemy with his own curse. Thus the prophecy was not a chain binding Harry to his path, but a mirror of Voldemort's choices. Imagine for a moment the other path. Neville's parents, Alice and Frank Longbottom, were themselves Aurors who had stood bravely against the Death Eaters. Their son, round-faced and quiet, might have become the boy whose fate intertwined with Voldemort's had the Dark Lord directed his attack at their home instead. The story could have been rewritten entirely. Harry would have grown up perhaps unnoticed, another boy at Hogwarts. Neville would have carried the scar, the burden, and the legend. The prophecy carried 2 names in its shadow, but Voldemort's decision narrowed the story to one. This truth casts Voldemort's downfall in an ironic light. He who believed himself to be above prophecy became its prisoner the moment he acted on it. His decision to hunt down Harry confirmed the very danger he sought to prevent. Dumbledore put it plainly. In attempting to kill you, Voldemort gave you powers and a future that made you his equal. This chilling twist underscores Rowling's theme. Destiny is shaped not by cryptic predictions, but by the choices that individuals make. Voldemort could have ignored the prophecy, dismissed it as nonsense. Instead, he fulfilled it with his own hand. Harry himself understood this heavy paradox only gradually. For much of his 5th year, the prophecy weighed on him like a curse, something etched into his blood that he could not escape. But when Dumbledore revealed the full wording, Harry realized the difference between inevitability and possibility. The prophecy said, "Neither can live while the other survives." Yet the power that Harry carried was not born in prophecy, but in his mother's sacrifice, in the shield of love that Voldemort could neither comprehend nor replicate. The prophecy opened a door, but it was Voldemort who walked through it and dragged Harry with him. Neville Longbottom, often overlooked in the films as comic relief, stands in the books as a silent echo of this alternate destiny. His life parallels Harry's in haunting ways. Parents tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange, a boy raised by a strict guardian, forever carrying the shadow of what might have been. When Neville draws the sword of Gryffindor in the final battle and strikes down Nagini, the last Horcrux, the narrative gives him a moment of triumph that hints at what could have been his story all along. He was not the chosen one by prophecy, but he became a chosen hero through action, bravery, and resilience. The films, by focusing entirely on Harry, flatten this rich duality. They present the prophecy as a declaration rather than a possibility. To the casual viewer, it seems obvious that Harry was destined to be Voldemort's downfall from the start. Yet Rowling wanted readers to wrestle with the ambiguity. The true horror of the prophecy lies not in its mystical wording, but in how human fear and pride twist it into reality. Voldemort chose Harry, and Harry chose to fight. Neville, though spared the mark, chose to rise in the shadows. Destiny is not one path, it is a labyrinth of choices. Consider the irony when Voldemort, desperate to secure his immortality, split his soul into Horcruxes and yet unknowingly placed a piece into Harry himself. The prophecy did not mention this accident. It was Voldemort's rash attempt to control the future that made Harry his living Horcrux, a man tethered to his enemy's soul. The films show this bond, but they often neglect to remind the audience that this too was a consequence of choice, not inevitability. Voldemort's arrogance created the very conditions that made him vulnerable. Rowling threads this theme throughout the series. Choices define character more than abilities or birthright. Harry was not more powerful than Neville by destiny alone. What separated him was the decision Voldemort made and the choices Harry embraced in return. Harry chose compassion, loyalty, and sacrifice. Neville chose courage and defiance, even when mocked or underestimated. Voldemort chose fear, domination, and cruelty, and those choices circled back like a curse, ensuring his downfall. Even Dumbledore, whose wisdom frames much of the series, emphasizes this distinction. He warns Harry that prophecies have power only when people act upon them. Many lie forgotten in the Hall of Prophecy, collecting dust because no one gave them life. Voldemort's mistake was believing that destiny could be controlled, that by striking first, he could bend the future to his will. Instead, he breathed life into the words he feared, chaining himself to an ending he could not escape. This theme resonates most strongly in the climax at the Battle of Hogwarts. When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest ready to lay down his life, he is not following a prophecy like a puppet, but making the ultimate choice of free will. He could have run, he could have fought differently. Instead, he embraced sacrifice, mirroring his mother's act of love. The prophecy did not demand that act. It was Harry's decision that turned the tide, making Voldemort's defeat not a matter of destiny, but of humanity's greatest strength, love. Neville's parallel moment comes when he stands against Voldemort, even as the Dark Lord mocks him in front of the shattered survivors. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," Neville spits. And in that moment, prophecy or not, he too embodies the spirit that defeats darkness. His blow against Nagini is not just a tactical victory, but a symbolic reminder. Fate could have chosen him, and he rose to meet that challenge anyway. The richness of Rowling's design lies in these dual threads. One boy marked by a curse, another marked by loss, both proving that greatness is not foretold, but forged. The films, by streamlining prophecy into a clean tale of destiny, miss the deeper message that every reader carries away from the novels. That message is this: the future is not bound by riddles, but by choices. As the dust settles over the ruins of Hogwarts, the echo of Trelawney's trembling voice lingers. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. But the truth is that both Harry and Neville carried that power. One bore the scar, the other the sword. One faced destiny, the other possibility. Together they show us that prophecy is only a shadow on the wall. What gives it life is the light of choice. Number 21. Lily Potter's Ancient Magic. When the story of Harry Potter is retold through films, the sacrifice of Lily Potter is shown as a tragic but fleeting moment. A mother stands before the Dark Lord, begs for her child, and falls dead in a burst of green light. Yet, in the pages of J.K. Rowling's books, this scene carries a deeper resonance, one that changes the entire fabric of wizarding history. The films present Lily's death as a heartbreaking start, but the novels reveal it as an ancient, binding magic older than wands and spells. To understand the true weight of this sacrifice, one must return to the night in Godric's Hollow and read carefully the words Dumbledore later imparts to Harry. You are protected, in short, by your ability to love. That protection was not metaphorical. It was as real as a spell and stronger than any curse Voldemort could cast. The distinction lies in how Rowling treats love. For many wizards, love is a human emotion, fragile and fleeting, something the Dark Lord himself mocks as weakness. Voldemort believes power comes only through fear, dominance, and a mastery of dark art. But Lily Potter proved him wrong by unlocking a magic far older than wand work. When she chose death rather than step aside and let her baby be killed, she invoked an enchantment of self-sacrifice that settled on Harry like an invisible shield. The killing curse rebounded not because of chance, but because of this magic. As Dumbledore explains in the Philosopher's Stone, your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. In this moment, Rowling establishes love as not only an emotion, but a force of nature. What is often missed in the cinematic adaptation is how deliberately Lily's choice operates as a spell in itself. She had the option to save herself. Voldemort offered her the chance to live, urging her to step aside. Yet she refused. It was this conscious refusal, this willing acceptance of death, that gave her love its potency. The act is not passive, it is an incantation, without words. The shield it created was not temporary, it endured for years, woven into Harry's very skin. When Quirrell, under Voldemort's control, tries to seize Harry in the Philosopher's Stone, he is burned, his hands blistering simply from contact. He couldn't touch me for a reason, Harry later realizes. This is not explained as coincidence, but as the living residue of Lily's sacrifice. The books also clarify that the power of this sacrifice does not merely protect Harry once, it creates a binding link that Voldemort cannot easily sever. When he attempts to kill Harry in the graveyard in the Goblet of Fire, he succeeds in creating a new body using Harry's blood. He believes that by taking Harry's blood into himself, he will nullify the protection and render it useless. But what Voldemort does not understand is that in doing so, he binds himself even more deeply to the boy he fears. Dumbledore explains this in The Order of the Phoenix. He took your blood, believing it would strengthen him. He took into himself a tiny part of the protection your mother once gave you. So long as you are alive, he cannot be sure of surviving. Voldemort, in his arrogance, preserves the very power that will ultimately destroy him. This makes Lily's magic not just a one-time act, but a continuing force that shapes the destiny of both Harry and Voldemort. Every major confrontation between them echoes back to that night in Godric's Hollow. When Voldemort attempts to kill Harry in the forest in the Deathly Hallows, Harry survives because the shard of his mother's protection remains in his veins, carried into Voldemort's own body through the stolen blood. The films, though visually spectacular, reduce this complex interplay to simple survival, neglecting the rich tapestry of magical cause and effect that Rowling meticulously wove. In truth, Lily's sacrifice is as central to the story as the Elder Wand, or the Horcruxes. Another overlooked aspect is how this ancient enchantment contrasts with other forms of protection in the wizarding world. Wards and charms can be broken. Azkaban's defenses fail, Hogwarts enchantments can be breached, and even Fidelius' charms collapse when a secret is betrayed. But Lily's protection resists Voldemort for years, unbroken even by his most powerful curses. When Dumbledore leaves Harry with the Dursleys, he explains that as long as Harry can call his aunt's house home, the bond of blood extends the shield. Petunia, bound by shared blood with Lily, unwillingly becomes a guardian of this ancient magic. It is a quiet, almost invisible safeguard, yet more powerful than armies of auras. The novels also underline Voldemort's personal terror of this magic. He cannot understand it because he was conceived under a love potion and grew up incapable of feeling genuine affection. His greatest weakness is not a missing Horcrux or a broken wand, but his inability to grasp the very thing that undoes him. That which Voldemort does not value, he takes no trouble to comprehend. Dumbledore tells Harry, this blindness is his undoing. Lily's power works precisely because Voldemort scorns it. He believes it to be weakness and thus fails to guard against it, even when it stands directly in his path. Consider the haunting image of Harry entering the forest to face death willingly, echoing his mother's sacrifice. At that moment, he repeats Lily's act, extending protection to all those fighting at Hogwarts. The Death Eater's curses falter, and their spells lose their potency. Harry, like his mother, offers his life freely, and once again, love manifests as a shield stronger than the Dark Lord's most ancient curses. "I am ready to die," Harry thinks in the Deathly Hallows. This parallel is no coincidence. It completes the circle Lily began, proving that her sacrifice was not an isolated event but the first movement in a larger symphony of protective love. The films simplify this complexity into cinematic moments, often stripping away the philosophical depth. In the movies, when Quirrell burns upon touching Harry, it is explained almost casually, without the full weight of the ancient protection. When Voldemort takes Harry's blood, the implication is glossed over. The subtle irony that Voldemort tethered himself to his enemy through arrogance is lost. What is left is the drama, but not the meaning. Readers of the books know that Lily's gift is not merely sentimental, it is the core of the narrative, the very reason Harry becomes the boy who lived. It is worth remembering, too, that this form of magic is older than Hogwarts itself. No professor teaches it, no textbook records it. Wizards of immense skill, Flitwick, McGonagall, even Snape, never display knowledge of such power. It exists beyond the reach of spells and wands, accessible only through the will to sacrifice. This makes it unique in the magical canon of Rowling's world. It cannot be replicated artificially, cannot be brewed or written into a spellbook. It lives only in the choice of the heart. Lily tapped into something primal, something even Voldemort's darkest magic could not corrupt. In many ways, Lily's sacrifice also sets the moral compass of the entire saga. Harry grows up knowing little of his parents, but this truth, that his mother chose death to save him, defines his courage. He does not merely inherit her eyes, as so many characters remind him, but her strength to put others before himself. This theme resurfaces again and again. When Harry refuses to abandon his friends, when he insists on facing Voldemort in the forest alone, when he protects Draco Malfoy in the Room of Requirement, each act is a reflection of Lily's choice. Her magic is not only a shield, but a legacy of values passed into her son's very soul. The irony that Voldemort himself ensures the survival of this power by using Harry's blood is one of the most brilliant strokes of the narrative. He believes he has conquered the weakness when in reality he has tied himself to it irrevocably. In that act he writes his own downfall. The films, for all their strengths, never fully emphasize this irony. The audience sees Voldemort reborn, but the quiet truth that he has cursed himself by taking into his veins the very force he despises is overshadowed by spectacle. In the books, however, this truth resonates like a hidden drumbeat, growing louder as the story approaches its climax. Ultimately, the secret of Harry Potter lies not in the wands, the prophecies, or the Horcruxes. It lies in the moment when a mother, faced with death, chose love over fear. That choice unleashed a magic Voldemort could never understand, and in misunderstanding, he guaranteed his defeat. Lily Potter's strength is not a background note in the story. It is the central chord. Her sacrifice lingers in every page, in every confrontation, and in every act of courage her son takes. The films hint at this truth, but only the books reveal its full magnitude. To read them is to recognize that love is not merely a sentiment in Rowling's world. It is a weapon, a shield, and the most ancient spell of all. Number 22, the tragic end of Colin Creevey. Of all the overlooked details in the Harry Potter films, few omissions feel as heavy as the absence of Colin Creevey's final chapter. On screen, he is remembered only as the cheerful boy with a camera, constantly eager to capture every moment with Harry Potter in the center of the frame. His smile, his boundless energy, and his near-naive adoration of the famous boy who lived painted him as comic relief, a background figure of enthusiasm in contrast to the darker currents of Hogwarts. But the books remind us that Colin's life did not end in laughter or light. It ended in silence, on the grounds of the very castle that had once been his dream. His death was not filmed, his sacrifice not acknowledged, and the tragedy of his story remains hidden for those who only watched and never read. Colin first entered the stage in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. A Muggle-born, he was smaller than the others, often overwhelmed by the sheer wonder of magic. He carried his camera everywhere, snapping pictures of Quidditch matches and school events, even pestering Harry for autographs. He was bright, innocent, sometimes annoying, but always genuine. When he was petrified by the basilisk, it became clear how vulnerable he really was. Yet, unlike other students, his fascination with magic never turned cynical. He embodied the wide-eyed hope of children who dreamed of becoming part of something larger. That is why the silence around his death feels so cutting. His journey was never meant to be ignored, but in the cinematic telling, it simply disappeared. When Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was released in print, J.K. Rowling gave Colin one last moment. The Battle of Hogwarts was raging. Voldemort's forces pressed hard against the defenders and chaos consumed the castle. The official rule was clear. Students under 17 were to be evacuated, led out of danger through the secret passages that kept them safe. Yet Colin refused to follow. He was barely 16, a boy who had not even reached legal adulthood in the wizarding world. And still, he made his choice. Rowling writes with chilling simplicity, Colin Creevey, though he was underage, must have sneaked back because Harry saw his body lying among the fallen. A single sentence, almost thrown away in the torrent of names and losses, but it speaks volumes. In that moment, Colin was no longer just a boy with a camera. He became a symbol of the cost of war, his eagerness to help, his refusal to hide, and his belief that he could contribute, even if only in the smallest way, showed courage as real as any auras or professors. He was not strong like Neville Longbottom, nor a strategist like Hermione Granger. He was not famous like Harry or powerful like the Order of the Phoenix. He was simply Colin, a child of Muggle parents, who wanted to stand with his friends when it mattered most. His death illustrates a haunting truth. Wars do not claim only the warriors, they claim the innocent who should never have been there at all. The films, however, made a different choice. They erased him from the Battle of Hogwarts entirely. To audiences who only watched, Colin never returned. He was simply one of many side characters written out to streamline the story. But in doing so, the films sacrificed an essential thread of meaning. The sight of Colin's body carried by Oliver Wood and Neville Longbottom, as Rowling described, would have been a striking image, forcing viewers to confront the price that even children paid. By omitting this, the films presented a cleaner version of the battle, one where losses were heavy but less personal, less heart-wrenching for those who loved even the smallest characters. Colin's fate resonates because of who he was. He represented the young dreamers of Hogwarts, those who marveled at magic rather than taking it for granted. When others saw Harry Potter as a celebrity, Colin saw him as inspiration. His camera was not just a toy, it was a way of immortalizing the wonders he never thought he would see. That such a boy should fall in battle, not because he was forced, but because he chose to stand with those he admired, carries a tragic poetry. He died still believing in the magic that had once dazzled him, still convinced that his presence mattered. In his quiet bravery, he became a child soldier, though no one ever called him that. The narrative weight of his death also lies in contrast. While many older wizards survived, Colin did not. Draco Malfoy, who often embodied cowardice, lived. Even characters who lingered on the edges, such as Pansy Parkinson, escaped the war alive. Yet Colin, who never held hate in his heart, was struck down before reaching manhood. This irony is brutal, a reminder that survival is rarely about fairness. It is about the randomness of battle, the cruel lottery of who stands and who falls. Colin's death, though written in a single line, embodies that truth more starkly than the fall of many named warriors. Some fans argue that the films did not have time to show every detail. Yet time was not the true barrier. A single shot of his small body, a mention of his name in the roll of the fallen, would have been enough. Instead, his absence leaves a void, as if cheerful faces can only exist for comic relief, but not for sacrifice. By ignoring Colin, the films missed the chance to underline that the Battle of Hogwarts was not just about chosen ones and legends. It was also about children, still too young to vote in the wizarding world, giving everything because they refused to stand aside. The story of Colin Creevey also mirrors the fate of countless nameless youths in real wars. History books often highlight generals, leaders, and heroes, but the young and anonymous often vanish into statistics. Rowling's choice to slip Colin's name among the fallen brings that reality into her narrative. It is uncomfortable to imagine a boy barely 16 lying cold on the battlefield, but it is honest. He reminds readers that the war against Voldemort was not a distant clash of titans. It was a conflict that dragged children into its fire, and some never returned. There is also something haunting in the fact that Colin's parents, muggles far removed from the Wizarding War, likely never fully understood how their son died. To them, Hogwarts was already a strange and foreign world. One can only imagine the grief of losing their child to a conflict they could not even see, in a castle they did not belong to, against a dark lord they never met. Colin's death was not just the end of a student's journey. It was a wound that crossed worlds, pulling Muggle families into the consequences of magical wars they never chose. One of the most overlooked details is that Colin was expelled from Hogwarts in his 6th year due to Voldemort's regime targeting Muggle-borns. He did not belong at the castle during the final year at all, yet he returned when it mattered most. He snuck back, defying both rules and danger, driven by loyalty alone. This detail matters. He was not swept into battle by accident. He consciously chose to come back, aware of the risks. His decision reflects pure courage, untainted by glory or power. He had no prophecy attached to his name, no destiny to fulfill. His bravery was ordinary, and perhaps that makes it extraordinary. Harry's brief reaction to seeing Colin's body is equally telling. He does not stop, does not mourn, for there is no time. But the sight registers. Colin's presence among the dead cuts through the blur of combat. In that moment, readers feel the sharp reminder that victory will never erase the losses. Rowling allows Harry to see him not as a follower or admirer, but as a casualty of standing beside him. It is one of those quiet moments that pierces deeper than long descriptions ever could. The boy who once begged for pictures died fighting in a war sparked by Harry's very existence. Colin's death also ties into the theme of innocence corrupted. Throughout the series, children are shielded from many dangers, but the final book strips that protection away. Fred Weasley's death devastates readers because it robs the world of laughter. Lupin and Tonks's deaths shatter hearts because they orphan a child. But Colin's death devastates in silence because it reminds us of all the faceless children who never had the chance to grow up. He was not even allowed to fight. Still, he ended up in the line of fire. His presence in the list of casualties is almost unbearable because it underlines that there was no true safeguard for innocence. In the broader tapestry of Harry Potter, Colin Creevey may seem like a minor figure, yet his journey carries one of the heaviest emotional truths. He was the boy who should have survived, the one who should have gone home with stories and photographs, filling albums with the magical world. Instead, his camera was silenced, his smile extinguished, and his name lost in adaptation. The books preserve his sacrifice, but the films denied audiences the chance to grieve for him. In doing so, they stripped the Battle of Hogwarts of a piece of its raw humanity, making it easier to watch but harder to remember. Colin Creevey remains the reminder that wars end childhoods too soon. His story lingers, not in long chapters, but in a single line that echoes with the weight of innocence. Undone. For those who read, the memory of his body on the battlefield is impossible to forget. It haunts because it is so brief, so understated, yet so powerful. He stands among the ghosts of Hogwarts not because he sought fame or recognition, but because he loved the world he entered too much to stay away. That love cost him everything, and his silence in the films makes his tragedy even sharper for those who know the truth. Number 23. Snape and the Wolfsbane Potion. Severus Snape's role as the reluctant brewer of Wolfsbane Potion for Remus Lupin is one of those narrative threads that the Harry Potter films almost brush aside with a dismissive wave of the wand. On screen, it appears as a minor school subplot, a detail to fill time between the grander spectacles of Dementors, Patronus charms, and Marauders maps. But in J.K. Rowling's text, this episode glimmers with hidden tension, resentment, and moral contradiction, casting Snape in a light far more complicated than the films ever dared to show. It is not merely about a potion, it is about old wounds, prejudice, and the battle between obligation and contempt. The Wolfsbane Potion itself is a striking element of magical invention. Unlike Polyjuice or Felix Felicis, it is not about disguise or luck, but survival and restraint. Remus Lupin, introduced in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, carried the heavy stigma of lycanthropy, cursed from childhood to transform into a dangerous beast each full moon. Without Wolfsbane, he was a threat not only to himself but to those around him. With it, he could remain conscious during his transformations, retaining his humanity even as his body gave way to the monstrous change. Dumbledore's insistence that Lupin have access to this potion was not merely about kindness, it was about responsibility. And it was Snape, the man who had once nearly been lured to Lupin's transformed form as a cruel prank engineered by Sirius Black, who was ordered to brew it. The tension here cannot be overstated. Rowling writes, Professor Snape made him a potion. It was a very complex potion, and Snape alone could make it. This was not charity born from goodwill. This was obedience to Albus Dumbledore's command. Snape's relationship with Lupin was strained from their school days, burdened with grudges that never healed. Snape, who had been humiliated by James Potter and Sirius Black, found in Lupin another reminder of that era, another shadow of the Marauder's cruelty. To be told that he must labor week after week to assist this man, to grant him safety and dignity, cut directly against his pride and bitterness. It was not the work of a friend, it was the work of a man compelled, chained by loyalty to Dumbledore's larger vision. The films flatten this dynamic. They show Snape setting a goblet before Lupin with a sneer and curt remark, as if to emphasize only his disdain. The cinematic eye does not linger on the weight of this paradox, on the very idea that a man who despises werewolves, who had once nearly been killed by one, was now the one protecting Hogwarts from such a danger. The book makes this clearer. In Chapter 14, Rowling notes, Professor Snape had followed his instructions exactly, and Lupin drank the potion. The emphasis is on precision, on duty, not kindness. Yet hidden behind the measured tone is the unspeakable truth. Lupin owed his safety each month to the man who hated him most. This is where Snape's duplicity emerges most strongly. On the one hand, he did his job impeccably, never producing a faulty brew, never allowing Lupin to miss a dose. This adherence to Dumbledore's command suggests discipline, a willingness to subordinate his personal feelings for the sake of the school's safety. On the other hand, Snape could not resist the darker pull of resentment. He chose, at a moment calculated for maximum effect, to reveal Lupin's secret. When he confronted Harry, Ron, and Hermione after the chaos at the Shrieking Shack, his fury was volcanic, not only toward Sirius Black, but also toward Lupin's very presence at Hogwarts. Rowling writes, Snape's eyes were glittering, and he was positively shaking with suppressed rage. His words gave away more than Dumbledore had ever intended the children to know. This act was no minor slip. By letting slip Lupin's condition, Snape ensured that the parents of Hogwarts students would pressure the school into removing him. Lupin himself recognized it. At the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, he resigned, confessing to Harry that it was better to leave quietly than to stay under the cloud of scandal. He said with quiet finality, "Parents will not want a werewolf teaching their children." What the films reduce to a sudden and almost neat resignation is, in the book, an act of betrayal wrapped in a veneer of responsibility. Snape did not simply dislike Lupin, he orchestrated the conditions of his downfall. The duality here is haunting. Snape was both savior and saboteur, both protector and betrayer. This contradiction fits seamlessly into his broader character arc, where love and hate, loyalty and spite exist in ceaseless tension. He could save Harry from falling off a broom during a Quidditch match by casting a counter-curse, yet later hurl cutting insults at him in the classroom. He could devote his life to shielding the child of the woman he loved, yet belittle that same child with cruelty. His treatment of Lupin during the Wolfsbane episode crystallizes this paradox. He gave life with one hand, and with the other he took away reputation and livelihood. This omission in the films robs viewers of one of the sharpest windows into Snape's soul. On screen, Snape's betrayal of Lupin is absent, replaced with a vague sense of animosity. The idea that Snape actively destroyed Lupin's chance at a stable life, despite protecting him month after month, would have painted him in a far more morally ambiguous light. For a character whose ultimate legacy hinges on ambiguity, whose final revelation in Deathly Hallows shocks precisely because it shows how blurred his loyalties always were, the absence of this detail weakens his portrayal. The Snape of the films is bitter and sarcastic. The Snape of the books is conflicted, torn between duty and vengeance. Consider the long shadow of this decision. Lupin, by being forced out of Hogwarts, re-entered a life of instability and secrecy. His condition, once managed under Dumbledore's watchful care, became again a burden in the eyes of wizarding society. Snape knew what this meant. He knew the stigma of being a werewolf, knew the impossibility of regular employment, knew the risk Lupin carried of isolation. Yet his revelation was deliberate. his act meant to cut as deep as possible. The cruelty lay not in failing to brew the potion, but in ensuring that Lupin could no longer remain among students where, paradoxically, he had been safest. The Wolfsbane episode is also important because it shows how Dumbledore's influence over Snape had limits. Dumbledore could command obedience, but he could not command forgiveness. Snape followed his orders, but he did so with resentment simmering under the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. This illuminates the fragile balance of Dumbledore's trust in him, a trust that was always pragmatic rather than affectionate. Dumbledore knew Snape would obey, but he also knew Snape's heart was filled with bitterness, a bitterness that could never fully be tamed. In brewing the Wolfsbane potion, Snape was both fulfilling and resisting Dumbledore's vision. One might argue that Snape's act of betrayal was in his own mind justified. He may have believed that exposing a werewolf to the wider community was a necessary precaution that the parents of Hogwarts had the right to know. But Rowling's narrative voice makes clear that this was not a matter of safety. It was a matter of spite. Snape did not calmly inform the Board of Governors. He blurted the truth in a moment of triumph, wielding it like a weapon against Lupin, and the consequence was inevitable. The betrayal was not calculated policy, but emotional vengeance. What makes this episode particularly poignant is the echo of the Marauders' history. Snape, once humiliated and endangered by James, Sirius, and Lupin, now held the power to humiliate in return. When Lupin lost his post, it was as though Snape had finally exacted his revenge against the gang that had tormented him. Yet, like all revenge, it carried the taste of emptiness. Snape remained as embittered as ever, his victory hollow, his grudges unhealed. Lupin, meanwhile, accepted his fate with dignity, showing the quiet strength that always contrasted Snape's volatility. By reducing this intricate story to a few scowls and sarcastic comments, the film stripped away a chance to show the fullness of Rowling's design. Snape's role in Lupin's downfall reveals the jagged edges of his morality, the truth that he was neither hero nor villain, but both at once. It is the kind of complexity that reminds readers why the books remain richer than their cinematic adaptations. The Wolfsbane potion was never just a potion, it was a mirror reflecting the twisted contours of Snape's soul. And so, hidden in the pages of Prisoner of Azkaban, there lies a story of divided loyalty, of a man bound by duty, yet undone by resentment. The Wolfsbane potion became a symbol of Snape's paradox. The healer who poisons, the protector who betrays. The films leave it behind as a footnote, but the books preserve it as a secret worth remembering, a secret that reveals more about Severus Snape than almost any other moment in his long, tortured life. Number 24. The Mystery of Crookshanks. Of all the creatures that cross the pages of J.K. Rowling's saga, few appear as quietly mysterious as the ginger cat that belongs to Hermione Granger. In the films, Crookshanks is little more than a background pet, occasionally seen padding across the Gryffindor common room or perched by Hermione's side. He receives little attention beyond being a prop that adds colour to her character. Yet the books reveal something far more enigmatic, hinting at a heritage that connects him to magical creatures far older and more instinctive than ordinary animals. Rowling makes it clear that Crookshanks is not just a common cat. He is half Kneazle, a magical breed known for its uncanny ability to sense untrustworthy individuals, and this hidden truth transforms our understanding of many pivotal moments in the story. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Crookshanks' peculiar behavior first draws attention when he relentlessly chases Ron's pet rat, Scabbers. At first, Ron interprets this as nothing more than the cruel antics of a predatory cat, and their friendship is tested as he accuses Hermione of being insensitive by keeping Crookshanks around. Yet Rowling subtly suggests that there is something deeper driving Crookshanks' obsession. Scabbers is no ordinary rat. He is Peter Pettigrew, an animagus who betrayed James and Lily Potter to Voldemort. The films omit this nuance, reducing the tension to petty squabbles between friends, but the book makes the reader notice Crookshanks' determination, as if guided by knowledge beyond normal feline instinct. The cat seems to see through the disguise in ways no human can, foreshadowing the revelation of Pettigrew's identity. The ability to see through deceit is a hallmark of the Kneazle breed. Rowling described Kneazles in her companion text, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, noting that these creatures can detect suspicious and distrustful characters and often react with hostility toward them. Crookshanks embodies this trait. He befriends Sirius Black in his animagus form, a large black dog, even when the rest of the wizarding world believes Sirius to be a murderer. The books reveal that Crookshanks does not hesitate or fear him, instead offering loyalty and trust. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling writes, Crookshanks leapt lightly into Black's lap and curled up as though he belonged there. This single moment carries enormous weight, at a time when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are convinced that Sirius is a danger to them. The cat calmly signals the opposite. His intuition proves more reliable than the Ministry of Magic or the newspapers that branded Sirius as a killer. Crookshanks' role as an ally to Sirius adds another layer to the unfolding mystery. It is Crookshanks who helps Sirius by stealing passwords to Gryffindor Tower, obtained by listening to Neville Longbottom muttering them in frustration. This is no ordinary cat trick. The animal participates directly in the chain of events that leads Harry and his friends to the Shrieking Shack, where the truth about Sirius and Pettigrew is finally unveiled. While the films simplify this arc and erase the subtle agency of Crookshanks, the book paints him as a participant who helps drive the truth into the open. His heritage as half Kneazle is not a trivial detail, but the explanation for why he could trust the dog and attack the rat at precisely the right moments. Hermione's choice of Crookshanks is itself foreshadowed to be meaningful. When she purchases him at the magical menagerie in Diagon Alley, the shopkeeper explains that the cat had been there for a very long time, constantly overlooked by other buyers. Rowling notes, nobody wanted him. People complain he's ugly. He's been here for ages. Half Kneazle, that's what I reckon. He's got that look. Hermione, known for her intelligence and fairness, sees value where others do not. This decision reveals her character but also sets in motion a chain of trust that would later protect her friends. The films cut this context, robbing Crookshanks of his symbolic role as a creature both rejected and essential, much like many characters in the series who are dismissed only to prove their worth. The Kneazle's reputation for loyalty also explains Crookshanks' unwavering bond with Hermione. In the books, he often follows her, waits for her, and even protects her. His presence is more than companionship. It is an extension of her wisdom and intuition. By choosing him, Hermione demonstrates not only kindness, but also an unconscious alignment with magical forces that help her and her friends survive. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Hermione struggles with the Time Turner and the overwhelming burden of her studies, Crookshanks becomes a silent comfort, grounding her in moments of chaos. Rowling describes him as stretching across her lap while she studies, a quiet but significant reminder that her choices have value. The films never grant him this depth, showing only a ginger blur in the background, a missed opportunity to highlight the subtleties of Hermione's growth. The tension between Crookshanks and Ron's rat becomes one of the most dramatic animal conflicts in the series. Ron, convinced that Crookshanks is trying to kill Scabbers, becomes furious with Hermione at one point, declaring that she should get rid of the cat. But Rowling allows the reader to see more than Ron does. She layers the narrative with suspicion, showing Crookshanks stalking the rat with unrelenting persistence. The eventual revelation that Crookshanks had been right all along reshapes the reader's understanding of every quarrel. Hermione's loyalty to her pet mirrors Crookshanks' loyalty to truth. This is storytelling. Symmetry at its finest, and it underlines the tragedy of the film's omission. Without this context, the screen version reduces their conflict to childish bickering, stripping it of the deeper significance Rowling crafted. Another striking moment occurs during the confrontation in the Shrieking Shack. While Harry and Ron are disarmed, unsure whether Sirius is truly dangerous, Crookshanks calmly positions himself on Sirius's chest, signaling safety. Rowling notes Crookshanks was still purring on Black's chest. The visual of a cat resting peacefully on someone whom everyone else perceives as a murderous villain forces the reader to reconsider what they think they know. The Kneasel's gift of discernment operates as a silent testimony, one that carries more weight than words. It is not only clever foreshadowing, but also a reminder that truth in Rowling's world is often found in overlooked places, through voices, or meows, that others dismiss. The symbolic resonance of Crookshanks as half Kneasel extends beyond immediate plot mechanics. In a series filled with disguises, deceptions, and hidden loyalties, his presence represents an unyielding compass. He sees what others cannot, and he acts accordingly. The films, in ignoring his nature, deny viewers this symbol. Instead, Crookshanks is reduced to a mascot, a pleasant but meaningless addition. Readers of the books, however, come away with the sense that every creature in Rowling's world has purpose, even one that purrs quietly by the fire. Rowling also uses Crookshanks to explore the theme of prejudice. The magical menagerie owner explicitly mentions that people found him ugly and unwanted. His squashed face and bottle-brush tail repelled most buyers. Hermione, who is often judged for her Muggle-born status, instinctively understands the pain of rejection and chooses the cat. Their bond is one forged in mutual recognition of worth beyond appearances. This adds dimension to Hermione's character arc, reflecting her values and compassion. The film's decision to portray Crookshanks simply as a prop denies this echo, leaving Hermione's decision underexplored.